The rain fell like tears from a gray sky, washing the smoke and ash from the burned wagon that sat broken on the muddy trail. 8-year-old crouched beside the twisted metal wheels, her small hands shaking as she touched the charred wood that had once been her family's home on wheels. Her dark hair hung wet around her face, and her traditional Modoc dress was torn and dirty from hiding in the rocks during the attack. The wagon had been everything to her family. Inside those canvas walls, her mother had sung lullabies in the Modoc language while mending clothes by lamplight. Her father had told stories of their ancestors while the wagon rolled across the endless plains. Her baby brother had taken his first steps on the wooden floor just last week, giggling as he stumbled from their mother's arms to their father's waiting hands. Now they were all gone. His throat burned from crying, but no more tears would come. She had watched from her hiding place in the rocks as the bad men came with guns and fire. They wore blue uniforms and shouted angry words she didn't understand. Her parents had tried to protect her and her brother, pushing them toward the rocks and telling them to run. But only she had made it to safety. The attack happened so fast. One moment they were a family traveling to find a new home away from the fighting between her people and the white soldiers. The next moment, everything was burning and screaming filled the air. Had wanted to run back and help, but her father's last words echoed in her mind. "Hide, little bird. Stay hidden until they go away." She had stayed hidden for 2 days, drinking rainwater from the rocks and eating the few berries she could find. Her stomach ached with hunger and her whole body shivered from the cold rain. Every sound made her jump. Was it the bad men coming back? Was it a wild animal that might hurt her? She didn't know which would be worse. The burned wagon held everything that remained of her world. She crawled inside the damaged frame, looking for anything that might have survived the fire. Most everything was ash and melted metal. But in the corner, she found her doll, the one her grandmother had made for her last winter. The doll's face was smudged with soot and her dress was singed, but she was still whole. Held the doll tight against her chest and whispered words her grandmother had taught her. Words that were supposed to bring comfort and protection. But the words felt empty now. How could there be protection when her family was gone? How could there be comfort when she was all alone in this big, scary world? The rain grew harder, drumming against the broken wagon cover. Pulled her knees to her chest and rocked back and forth, the way her mother used to rock her when she had bad dreams. But this wasn't a dream she could wake up from. This was real, and it was forever. As darkness began to fall, heard something that made her heart race with fear. Footsteps, heavy boots splashing through the mud. The bad men had come back. She crawled deeper into the wagon, trying to make herself as small as possible. Maybe if she was very quiet, they wouldn't see her. The footsteps came closer, squeezed her eyes shut and held her breath. She heard a man's voice, deep and gentle, calling out words she couldn't understand. But something about his voice was different from the angry shouting she remembered from the attack. This voice sounded sad and worried. "Anyone here?" The voice called again, this time in broken Modoc words that her people used when trading with white settlers. "I want to help." His eyes opened wide. The bad men wouldn't speak her language. They wouldn't say they wanted to help. But she was still too scared to move or make a sound. What if it was a trick? The footsteps moved around the wagon. Could see boots through a gap in the burned wood, not the shiny black boots of the soldiers, but brown leather boots covered in mud and wear. Working boots. Cowboy boots. "Little one," the voice said softly in Modoc words. "I know you're scared. I found tracks in the mud, small feet, a child's feet. I'm not here to hurt you." His heart pounded so loud she was sure the man could hear it. She wanted to believe him, but trust felt impossible now. Everyone who was supposed to protect her was gone. The man sat down heavily in the mud beside the wagon. Could see him through the gap now, not a soldier in a blue uniform, but a cowboy in a worn coat and hat. His face looked tired and sad, with lines around his eyes that spoke of hard living under the sun. "My name is Jake," he said quietly, still using the simple Modoc words. "I was riding the trail when I saw the smoke yesterday, been looking for survivors ever since." He paused, and his voice got even softer. "I found your family, little one. I buried them proper, with respect, your people's way, best as I could manage." His body shook with silent sobs. He had found them. He had buried them. That meant it was really true. They were really gone forever. Jake continued talking, his voice gentle and patient. "I got fresh water and food in my saddlebags, got blankets too. You've been out here 2 days by the tracks. You must be cold and hungry and scared." He sighed deeply. "I got a little girl of my own back home, About your age, I reckon. If something happened to me, I'd want someone to take care of her." The rain kept falling and kept shivering. She was so cold and hungry and tired, but she was more scared than anything else. What if this man was lying? What if he was one of the bad men, just dressed different? But something in his voice made her think of her father. Not the words, her father's voice had been higher and spoke their language perfectly, but the feeling underneath the words. The same kind of gentle strength her father had when he comforted her after nightmares. "I know you're scared to trust," Jake said, almost like he could read her thoughts. "After what happened, I don't blame you none, but you can't stay out here alone. The nights are getting colder, and there's wild animals that come looking for food after dark." As if to prove his point, a coyote howled somewhere in the distance, shrank deeper into the wagon, clutching her doll. Jake stood up slowly. "I'm gonna sit right here by this wagon tonight," he announced. "Got my bedroll and my fire. You think about what I said. When you're ready, if you're ready, you just let me know." Watch through the gap as the cowboy walked to his horse, a big brown animal that stood patiently in the rain. He pulled blankets and supplies from the saddle bags, then built a small fire under the shelter of some rocks. The fire crackled and popped, sending warm light dancing through the rain. The smell of cooking food made stomach growl loudly. She hadn't eaten anything but a few bitter berries in 2 days. Jake cooked what looked like beans and meat over his fire, and the smell was wonderful and terrible at the same time. Wonderful because she was so hungry. Terrible because it reminded her that she would never again taste her mother's cooking. As the night grew darker and colder, found herself watching the cowboy by his fire. He didn't try to look for her or call to her again. He just sat quietly, sometimes humming soft songs under his breath. When he thought she wasn't looking, she saw him wipe tears from his eyes. Why would he cry for people he didn't know? The coyote howled again, closer this time. His whole body trembled with fear and cold. She was so tired, but every time she started to fall asleep, she heard sounds that might be danger. Her father wasn't here to protect her anymore. Her mother wasn't here to hold her safe. She was completely alone in the world, and she didn't know how to survive by herself. When woke up, the fire was still burning. Somehow during the night, she had fallen asleep despite her fear. The cowboy named Jake was adding wood to the flames, moving quietly so he wouldn't wake her if she was sleeping. His horse stood nearby, still saddled and ready, as if the man was prepared to leave quickly if needed. Morning light filtered through the gray clouds, and the rain had stopped. His body ached from sleeping, curled up on the hard wagon floor, and her stomach felt like it was eating itself from hunger. She watched Jake through the gap in the wagon wall as he cooked breakfast over his fire. He moved like her father had, careful and thoughtful, not rushed or angry. When he stirred the food in his pan, he did it gently. When he spoke to his horse, his voice was kind. These were not the movements of a bad man, but had learned that the world was full of surprises, and not all of them were good ones. Jake seemed to sense she was awake. "Morning, little one," he said without looking toward the wagon. "Got some hot food here if you want it. Coffee too, though I suppose a young one like you might prefer water." Stomach made a loud rumbling sound that echoed inside the wagon. She pressed her hand against it, embarrassed, but Jake just chuckled softly. "I remember when my Sarah was about your size," he said, still stirring the food. "That girl could eat more than a full-grown ranch hand when she was hungry. Used to worry me and my wife something fierce, where she put all that food in such a little body." He had a daughter and a wife. This made feel a little safer somehow. Bad men didn't usually talk about their families with such gentle voices. "Sarah's got dark hair like yours," Jake continued. "Always getting it tangled up in tree branches when she climbs around our ranch. Drives her mama crazy, but I tell my wife that a girl needs to know how to climb trees and run fast. World's not always a safe place for young ones." The smell of the cooking food was making dizzy with hunger. She hadn't realized how weak she had become from not eating. Her hands shook as she held her doll, and her head felt light and strange. Jake noticed. Without looking directly at the wagon, he said, "I'm gonna put a plate of food right here by these rocks, and a cup of water. You can take it or leave it, but I hate to see food go to waste." He did exactly what he said. He filled a metal plate with beans and meat and some kind of bread, then set it on a flat rock about 10 feet from the wagon. Next to it, he placed a cup of clear water. Then he walked back to his fire and sat down with his own plate, eating quietly. Watched him eat for several minutes. He didn't look toward the wagon or the food he had left. He just ate his breakfast and hummed softly to himself. The song sounded sad but somehow comforting too. Finally, hunger won over fear, crawled out of the wagon as quietly as she could. Her legs were wobbly from not moving much in 2 days, and she had to grab the wagon wheel to keep from falling. Jake heard the sound but didn't turn around. He just kept eating and humming. Crept toward the food like a wild animal approaching a trap. Every step, she expected the cowboy to grab her or shout at her. But he just sat by his fire with his back mostly turned, giving her space to be scared. The food was still warm when she reached it. The first bite of beans nearly made her cry with relief. She was so hungry that she couldn't eat slowly, even though her mother had always taught her to have good manners. She stuffed the food in her mouth with her hands, not caring how she looked. "Easy there, little bird," Jake said gently, using the same words her father had called her. "Food's not going anywhere. Eat too fast and you'll make yourself sick." Froze with food in her mouth. How did he know what her father called her? Had he been watching them before the attack? Was he one of the bad men after all? Jake must have sensed her fear because he turned around slowly, keeping his hands where she could see them. "Your papa called you that when he was trying to get you to safety," he explained. "I heard him when I was tracking the men who did this. I was too far away to help, and I'm sorry for that, more sorry than you know." Stared at him, still chewing slowly. His face looked genuinely sad and guilty, like he really meant what he said. And now she understood why he had been crying by the fire last night. He felt bad that he couldn't save her family. "Who were you tracking?" she asked in English. Her voice came out scratchy and rough from crying and not talking for 2 days. Jake's face hardened, but not in an angry way toward her, angry toward whoever had hurt her family. "Deserters," he said. "Soldiers who ran away from their unit and turned to robbing folks on the trails. They've been hitting wagons for weeks, but this," he gestured toward the burned wagon. "This was pure meanness. Your family wasn't carrying nothing valuable enough to kill for." Nodded. Her parents had told her they were traveling light, only bringing what they needed to start over somewhere safe. They didn't have gold or fancy things that robbers would want. "Did you catch them?" she asked. Jake's jaw tightened. "I did, and I made sure they won't hurt anybody else ever again." Something in his voice told that she didn't want to know exactly what that meant, but she felt a little spark of something that might have been satisfaction. The bad men who killed her family were gone too. She finished eating in silence, and Jake went back to tending his fire. When she was done, she carried the empty plate back toward him but stopped a few feet away, still not quite ready to get too close. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You're welcome, little bird." He took the plate gently, being careful not to touch her hand. "You got a name you want to tell me?" She said, "It means eternal blossom." "That's a beautiful name," Jake said. "Fits you." He paused, then asked carefully, "Where were your folks headed? You got any other family somewhere?" The question hit like a physical blow. She had been so focused on surviving the last 2 days that she hadn't thought about what came next. Where would she go now? What would she do? "We were going to California," she said slowly. "My father heard there was work there and people wouldn't bother us about being Modoc, but—" She trailed off. She didn't know anyone in California. She didn't know anyone anywhere. "What about grandparents, aunts and uncles?" Shook her head. "The war scattered everyone. Some went to the reservation, some went to live with other tribes. My grandmother died last winter." Her voice got smaller. "I don't know where anybody is." Jake was quiet for a long moment, staring into his fire. When he spoke, his voice was careful and gentle. "I can't leave you out here alone. You're just a little girl, and these trails aren't safe even for grown men traveling armed. But I don't want to force you to come with me if you're scared." "Where would we go?" she asked. "My ranch is about 3 days' ride from here. I got a wife named Mary and my daughter Sarah. We got a good house, plenty of food, and room for one more if needed." He looked at her seriously. "I won't lie to you, some folks in my town might not be welcoming to a Modoc girl, but Mary and Sarah will treat you like family, and I'll make sure nobody bothers you." Thought about this? She had heard stories about how some white families treated Indian children, not all of them good stories. But she had also heard stories about kind families who adopted children who had lost their own families. "What would happen to me?" she asked. "Would I be like a servant?" Jake's face darkened. "Any man who treated a child like a servant in my house would answer to my fist," he said firmly. "You'd be treated like our own daughter, same as Sarah. Same food, same bed, same love." The word love made his chest tight. She had thought she would never hear that word again, never feel it again. "You don't have to decide right now," Jake said. "We can travel slow and you can think about it. If you change your mind along the way, I'll help you figure out something else." Looked back at the burned wagon, then at Jake's kind face, then at his strong horse that could carry them both to safety. She thought about her parents and what they would want for her. They had died trying to get her to safety. They wouldn't want her to stay out here alone and scared. And something in Jake, eyes reminded her of her father's eyes, steady and protective and honest. "Okay," she said quietly, "I'll come with you." Jake smiled for the first time since she'd met him, and it transformed his whole face. "All right then, little bird, let's get you somewhere safe." Before they left the place where Swirled had ended, Jake did something that surprised her. He gathered stones from the creek bed and built a small cairn beside the burned wagon. Then he took off his hat and spoke words in Modoc that were clumsy but respectful, a prayer for the dead that someone had taught him long ago. "Every soul deserves to be remembered proper," he explained when he saw watching with wide eyes. "Your folks were good people and they loved you fierce. That matters." Felt tears coming again, but this time they were different. Not the desperate, terrified tears of the last 2 days, but something quieter and sadder and somehow cleaner. She added her own stones to the pile and whispered her own goodbye in words her grandmother had taught her. Jake had packed extra supplies on his horse, blankets, food, and even some clothes that looked like they might fit a young girl. When asked about them, he looked embarrassed. "I was hoping I'd find survivors," he admitted. "Bought these in the last town just in case. Sarah outgrew them anyway." The horse was gentle and patient when Jake helped climb up behind the saddle. The animal was much bigger than the horses her people rode, but his movements were smooth and comfortable. Jake made sure she had blankets wrapped around her and taught her how to hold onto his belt so she wouldn't fall. "His name's Thunder," Jake said, patting the horse's neck. "He's carried me through worse weather than this, and he's got more sense than most people I know." As they rode away from the burned wagon and the stone cairn, felt like she was leaving the last piece of her old life behind. Everything familiar was disappearing behind them. The rocks where she had hidden, the creek where her family had stopped to rest, even the smell of smoke and ash that had clung to her clothes. The trail wound through hills covered in pine trees and patches of grass that were turning brown with the coming winter. Jake rode slowly and talked to her over his shoulder, telling her about the country they were passing through and the animals they might see. He didn't ask her questions about what had happened or try to make her talk when she didn't want to. He just kept up a gentle conversation that helped fill the scary silence. "That peak there with the snow on it," he said, pointing to a distant mountain. "That's where the eagle's nest comes spring. Sarah and I like to ride up there and watch them teach their bobbies to fly. Prettiest thing you ever saw, baby eagle taking its first flight." Found herself listening despite her sadness. The way Jake talked about his daughter made it clear that he loved her very much. Sarah sounded like a girl who was allowed to climb trees and ride horses and explore the mountains. That was different from what had heard about white families. On the first night, Jake made camp in a sheltered spot between two large rocks that blocked the wind. He built the fire carefully, showing how to arrange the wood so it would burn long and steady. Then he cooked beans and bacon, and something he called biscuits that were soft and good with honey. "Mary makes better biscuits than me," he said apologetically, "but these'll fill your belly." After they ate, Jake spread his bedroll on one side of the fire and made a separate sleeping area for on the other side, with extra blankets and his saddle for a pillow. He positioned himself between her and the trail, so anyone approaching would have to go through him first. "You have trouble sleeping, you just say something," he told her. "I'm a light sleeper anyway." Lay under the blankets, staring up at the stars that looked cold and distant. Everything was different now. Different food, different language, different smells, different sounds. Even the stars looked different when you were lying next to a stranger's fire instead of curled up safe in your family's wagon. "Jake," she said quietly into the darkness. "Yes, little bird. How do I know if your family will like me?" Jake was quiet for a moment. "Well," he said finally, "Sarah's been wanting a sister for as long as I can remember. She's been pestering us to have another baby, but Mary and I, well, that's not going to happen. So I think Sarah's going to be over the moon to have you around." "What about your wife?" "Mary's got the biggest heart of anyone I ever met," Jake said. "She takes in every stray animal that comes by our place. Last month she was nursing a wounded coyote pup back to health, even though everyone told her it was foolish. If she'll take care of a wild animal, she'll sure take care of a little girl who needs a home. What if I don't fit in? What if I'm too different? Jake rolled over so he was facing her across the fire. In the flickering light, his face looked serious and kind. Different isn't bad. Different is just different. Sarah's got hair and freckles and talks a mile a minute. You got dark hair and quiet ways and know things she don't know. That makes you both special, not better or worse than each other. But I'm Indian. Some white people hate Indians. Some do, Jake agreed honestly. And I won't lie to you about that. There's ignorant folks everywhere, and some of them might say unkind things. But the people who matter, the people worth knowing, they judge a person by what's in their heart, not what color their skin is or what language they grew up speaking. Thought about this? Her parents had taught her that there were good and bad people in every group: Modoc, white, Mexican, all kinds. The bad men who killed her family were white, but so was Jake, who was saving her. Jake, she said again. What is it, little bird? Thank you for burying my family proper. That was important. You're welcome, he said quietly. They deserved respect. The second day of travel was warmer, and they made good time across rolling grassland dotted with cattle. Jake pointed out different brands on the cattle, explaining which ranches they belonged to and how the marking system worked. He talked about how to tell if a cow was healthy, how to spot good grazing land, and why some areas were better for horses than others. Sarah knows all this stuff better than I do, he said with pride. Girls got a natural way with animals, can gentile a wild horse faster than most grown men. They stopped for lunch beside a clear stream where Thunder could drink and rest. Jake showed how to catch fish with his hands by being very still and patient. They didn't catch any fish, but found herself almost smiling at the silly faces Jake made when they slipped away from him. Don't tell Sarah I'm this bad at fishing, he said with mock seriousness. I got a reputation to protect. That afternoon, they met other travelers on the trail, a family in a wagon heading west. Tensed up when she saw them, remembering the last time strangers had approached her family's wagon. But Jake handled the meeting calmly, tipping his hat politely and exchanging news about trail conditions. The family seemed friendly enough, but noticed how they looked at her. Not mean exactly, but curious and maybe a little confused to see an Indian girl traveling with a white cowboy. Jake noticed too, and he kept the conversation short. Folks are naturally curious, he explained after they had passed. Most of them don't mean any harm by it, they just don't see mixed groups very often out here. What did you tell them about me? Truth, Jake said simply. That you're under my protection and heading to my ranch, that's all they need to know. On the third morning, Jake woke up earlier than usual. Today we get home, he announced. Mary's probably got every window in the house clean by now, and Sarah's been counting days since I left. As they rode that day, the country began to look more settled. They passed several ranches with neat fences and fat cattle. They saw fields that had been planted and harvested, and windmills turning in the breeze to pump water. Everything looked peaceful and prosperous and safe. That's the place, Jake said, pointing to a large ranch with a white house. And over there is where they live. Good neighbors, all of them. They'll help if there's trouble, and they mind their own business otherwise. Late in the afternoon, they topped a hill, and Jake pulled Thunder to a stop. There she is, he said with satisfaction. Home. Below them lay a valley with a winding creek and the prettiest ranch had ever seen. The house was made of wood and stone, with a wide porch and flower gardens that even in late fall showed signs of careful tending. There were barns and corrals and fields where horses grazed peacefully. Smoke rose from the chimney, promising warmth and food and safety. It's beautiful, breathed. Wait till you meet the women who made it that way, Jake said with a grin. Come on, little bird, let's go home. Thunder's hooves made a cheerful sound on the packed earth as they rode down into the valley. Could smell wood smoke and cooking food and something that might have been fresh bread. The ranch looked even prettier up close, with painted shutters on the windows and a garden full of late-season vegetables. Before they even reached the house, the front door burst open, and a girl with hair in braids came running out. She must be Sarah, thought. She looked about the same age as but was taller and had more freckles than anyone had ever seen. Papa, Papa, Sarah called, running toward them with her arms outstretched. You're home. Mama said you'd be back today, and I've been watching the road since sunrise and... She stopped suddenly when she noticed sitting behind her father on the horse. A woman appeared on the porch, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. She had kind eyes and brown hair pinned back neatly, and she wore a simple dress covered by a flour-dusted apron. This must be Mary. Jake dismounted and caught Sarah up in a big hug, swinging her around once before setting her down. "I missed you too, little rabbit," he said with a laugh. "But I brought someone home with me, someone who needs our help." He reached up to help down from Thunder. Her legs were shaky from 3 days of riding, and she almost fell before Jake steadied her. Sarah stared at her with wide blue eyes, taking in torn dress and braided hair and the way she clutched her soot-stained doll. Jake said gently, "This is my daughter Sarah and my wife Mary. Ladies, she's going to be staying with us for a while." Mary stepped forward with a warm smile that reminded of her own mother. "Welcome to our home, sweetheart," she said in a voice that was soft and motherly. "You look tired and hungry. Let's get you inside where it's warm." Sarah bounced on her toes with excitement. "Are you really staying with us? For how long? Where did Papa find you? What happened to your dress? Is that your dolly? What's her name?" "Sarah," Jake said with gentle warning, "give the girl a chance to breathe. She's had a hard few days." But found herself almost smiling at Sarah's enthusiasm. It was nice to meet someone who was excited to see her instead of afraid or suspicious. "Her name is Little Star," said quietly, holding up her doll. "My grandmother made her." "She's beautiful," Sarah declared. "I have a doll too. Her name is Rosebud and she has a blue dress and real hair. Want to see her?" Before anyone could answer, Sarah grabbed S's free hand and started pulling her toward the house. "Come on. I'll show you my room and you can meet all my animals. I have a cat named Whiskers and a dog named Buddy and a pet chicken named who follows me everywhere." Mary laughed and followed them up the porch steps. "Sarah, honey, let's get settled first. She probably wants a hot meal and a bath before she meets the menagerie." The inside of the house was warm and bright, with comfortable furniture and quilts hanging on the walls. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and roasting meat, and there were fresh flowers in a jar on the table. Everything looked clean and cozy and loved. "Sit here by the fire, sweetheart," Mary said, guiding to a rocking chair with soft cushions. "Jake, you take care of Thunder. Sarah, help me fix a plate for our guest." While Jake went to tend to his horse, Mary herself heating food and Sarah chattered away about everything she had done while her father was gone. She had helped her mother can vegetables, started a new quilt, and taught the chicken to come when called. "Mama says I talk too much," Sarah said cheerfully, "but Papa says a quiet house is a sad house. Do you like to talk? Some people don't, and that's okay too. I can talk enough for both of us if you want to just listen." Found herself relaxing for the first time in days. Sarah's constant chatter was somehow comforting, filling up all the silent spaces that might have been filled with scary thoughts. And Mary moved around the kitchen with the same gentle efficiency that own mother had shown. "Here we are," Mary said, setting a plate of food in front of. There was roast beef and potatoes and green beans and corn bread with butter. It smelled wonderful and looked like enough food for 3 people. "I don't know what you like to eat," Mary said apologetically, "but this is what we were having for supper anyway, if there's something else you'd prefer." "This looks perfect," said honestly. It was more food than she had seen in days. While ate, Jake returned from the barn and sat down heavily in his own chair by the fire. Mary brought him coffee and a plate of food, then sat down with her own meal. Sarah perched on a stool between them, still bubbling with questions and stories. "Papa, tell us about your trip," Mary said. "Did you find what you were looking for?" Jake's face grew serious. "I found more than I bargained for," he said quietly. He glanced at, then seemed to decide something. "Lost her family to those deserters I was tracking, found her hiding by their burned wagon." Mary's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, looking at with eyes full of sympathy. "I'm so sorry." Sarah's chatter stopped completely for once. "Your mama and papa are gone?" she asked in a small voice. Nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Sarah considered this with the serious expression that children sometimes get when they're trying to understand something too big and sad for their years. "That must hurt terrible bad," she said finally. "When my grandpa died, I cried for a whole week." "Sarah," Mary said softly. "What? It's true, and Mama cried too. Crying helps sometimes." Sarah looked at with earnest blue eyes. "You can cry here if you need to, we won't mind." Something about Sarah's simple honesty broke down the wall that had built around her feelings. The tears came suddenly and hard, all the grief and fear and loneliness pouring out at once. She dropped her fork and covered her face with her hands, sobbing. Mary was beside her in an instant, wrapping warm arms around her and making soft, comforting sounds. "That's right, sweetheart. Let it out. You're safe now." Sarah patted shoulder awkwardly but kindly. Jake sat quietly in his chair, his own eyes bright with unshed tears. When the crying finally stopped, felt empty but somehow cleaner, Mary handed her a soft handkerchief and smoothed her hair back from her face. "Feeling a little better?" Mary asked gently. Nodded. "I'm sorry I made a mess of dinner." "Don't you apologize for grieving, child. That's natural and healthy and nothing to be ashamed of." Mary's voice was firm but kind. "Now, what do you say we get you cleaned up and find you some proper clothes? Sarah's got some dresses that might fit you." The next few hours passed in a blur of warm water, clean clothes, and gentle care. Mary heated water for a bath and found soap that smelled like lavender. Sarah donated a blue dress that was almost the right size, along with clean undergarments and stockings. "You can borrow anything you need," Sarah said generously. "Mama can make you new dresses if you're staying long enough." After was clean and dressed, Mary sat her down and gently brushed the tangles out of her long, dark hair. It had been days since anyone had taken care of her this way, and the gentle touch nearly made her cry again. "You have beautiful hair," Mary said, working out a particularly stubborn knot. "Would you like me to braid it for bed, or do you prefer it loose?" "Braided, please," said. "My mother always braided it at night." Mary's hands were gentle and skilled as she wove hair into a neat braid. When she was finished, she tied it with a ribbon that Sarah contributed from her own collection. "There," Mary said with satisfaction. "You look like a proper young lady now." They set up a bed for in Sarah's room, using extra blankets and pillows to make a comfortable sleeping place on the floor. Sarah was thrilled to have a roommate and kept up a steady stream of whispered conversation until Mary came in and told them it was time for sleep. "Tomorrow I'll show you the whole ranch," Sarah promised as they settled down for the night. "And you can meet all the animals and see my favorite climbing tree, and maybe we can go fishing in the creek." "Sarah," came Mary's voice from the hallway, "let rest. Tomorrow will take care of itself." But as lay in the darkness listening to Sarah's gentle breathing and the distant sound of Jake and Mary talking quietly in the kitchen, she found herself looking forward to tomorrow for the first time since the attack. Maybe this could be home. Maybe these good people really would take care of her the way Jake had promised. Maybe she could belong somewhere again. Woke to the sound of a rooster crowing and Sarah giggling about something. Sunlight was streaming through the window, and she could smell bacon cooking downstairs. For a moment, she forgot where she was and expected to hear her mother calling her for breakfast. Then reality came back, along with the familiar ache in her chest. "You're awake," Sarah said cheerfully. She was already dressed and sitting on her bed, brushing her hair. "Mama said to let you sleep as long as you wanted, but I was hoping you'd wake up soon. There's so much I want to show you." Downstairs, Mary was bustling around the kitchen, making enough breakfast to feed a small army. Jake sat at the table drinking coffee and reading what looked like a letter, his face serious. "Good morning, sweetheart," Mary said when she saw. "How did you sleep?" "Very well, thank you," said politely. The bed had been comfortable and the room felt safe, but she had still woken up several times during the night from dreams about smoke and shouting. "Sit, sit," Mary said, guiding her to a chair. "Sarah, stop bouncing and eat your breakfast. You too, growing girls need good food." The breakfast was wonderful eggs and bacon and pancakes with real maple syrup. Tried to eat slowly and with good manners, the way her mother had taught her, but everything tasted so good after days of beans and hardtack. Jake folded up his letter and looked at seriously. "I got some news this morning. The circuit judge is coming through next week, and I need to report what happened to your family and what I did about it. It's just legal business, but he might want to talk to you too." Felt her stomach tighten with worry. "Will I get in trouble?" "For what?" Jake asked, surprised. "For being alive when my family isn't. For coming here with you. For being Indian." Jake's face darkened, but not at her. "Child, you listened to me good. You didn't do nothing wrong. Nothing that happened was your fault, and you got every right to be alive and safe. As for being Indian," he shrugged, "that's just who you are, and there's nothing wrong with it." "What will the judge want to know?" asked. Just what you saw if you're ready to talk about it. But I already told him most everything in my report. You don't have to say nothing you don't want to. Mary reached over and squeezed his hand. We'll be right there with you, sweetheart. You won't have to face anything alone. After breakfast, Sarah made good on her promise to show the ranch. They started with the barn, where Thunder lived alongside several other horses and some milk cows. Sarah introduced to each animal by name, explaining their personalities and quirks. That's Buttercup, she said, pointing to a golden horse with a white star on her forehead. She's mine, sort of. Papa bought her for me last spring when she was just a filly. She's gentle and smart, and she likes apples. Sarah showed how to hold her hand flat when offering treats to the horses, and how to brush their coats until they shined. The work was peaceful and familiar. People had always been good with horses, and she found herself relaxing as she worked. Next, they visited the chicken coop, where the pet chicken came running as soon as she saw Sarah. The bird was white and fluffy and seemed to think she was a dog, following Sarah everywhere and making soft, clucking sounds. Mama says it's silly to have a pet chicken, Sarah said, scratching under the chin. But Papa says every ranch needs at least one useless animal around for entertainment. They spent the morning exploring every corner of the ranch. Sarah showed the vegetable garden where Mary grew tomatoes and beans and squash, the creek where they could catch fish and wade on hot days, and the big oak tree with branches perfect for climbing. I built a tree house up there, Sarah said proudly, pointing to a platform made of boards nailed between the branches. Well, Papa helped, want to see. Climbing the tree felt wonderful after days of sitting on a horse. Had always been a good climber, and it felt good to use her body in a familiar way. The tree house was simple but clever, with a roof to keep out rain and spaces for storing treasures. This is where I come when I want to think, Sarah explained. Or when Mama says I'm being too wild for the house, you can use it too whenever you want. From the tree house could see the whole ranch spread out below them. The fields where cattle grazed, the neat rows of the vegetable garden, the barn and corrals, and the house with smoke rising peacefully from the chimney. It looked safe and prosperous and permanent. Sarah said carefully, what if people in town don't like having an Indian girl around? Sarah considered this seriously. Well, some people are stupid, she said finally. Mama says stupid people are afraid of anything different and fear makes them mean, but most folks around here are decent, and even if some aren't, so what? This is our ranch and you're our family now. Am I really family? Of course you are. Papa brought you home, didn't he? And Mama's already talking about making you new dresses, and I've been wanting a sister forever. Sarah grinned. Besides, you're way more interesting than most of the kids in town. You know how to track animals and speak different languages and all sorts of things I don't know. That afternoon, Mary sat down with both girls to plan's wardrobe. She had a trunk full of fabric and patterns, and she showed different materials and colors to see what she liked. We'll start with everyday dresses, Mary said practically. Something sturdy for ranch work and play, then maybe a nice dress for church and special occasions. What colors do you like, sweetheart? Had never been asked to choose her own clothes before. Her mother had made what was practical with whatever materials they could trade for. The idea of having preferences seemed strange and wonderful. I like blue, she said tentatively, and green like the trees. Blue and green it is, Mary said with a smile. Sarah, what do you think about this blue calico for everyday wear? The afternoon passed pleasantly with talk of dresses and ribbons and practical things like winter coats and sturdy shoes. Mary measured carefully, chatting all the while about how to hem skirts and adjust sleeves and add pockets to hold important things. When Jake came in for supper, he brought news from town. Talked to the school teacher today, he announced. Miss says she'd be happy to have another student. School starts again after harvest if you're interested. Looked around the table at their expectant faces. They were talking about her future as if it was already decided, as if she really would be staying here permanently. The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. I don't know how to read English very well, she said quietly. That's what school's for, Sarah said cheerfully. I can help you practice at home. I'm real good at reading. And if anyone gives you trouble about being there, Jake added, they'll answer to me. Miss a good woman and she won't tolerate nonsense from ignorant children or their parents. That evening after supper, they sat by the fire as a family. Mary worked on her mending while Jake read aloud from a book of adventure stories. Sarah curled up on the rug with Whiskers the cat, and sat in the rocking chair, holding little Star and listening to the gentle voices. The story was about a brave ship captain sailing to exotic lands, but found herself more interested in watching the family around her. The way Jake paused to explain difficult words. The way Mary would look up from her sewing to smile at funny parts. The way Sarah made dramatic faces during exciting scenes. This was what family looked like. Not just people living in the same house, but people who took care of each other and enjoyed each other's company and made room for one more person who needed belonging. When the story was finished and Sarah had been sent yawning to bed, lingered by the fire with Jake and Mary. She had something she needed to say, but the words felt big and important and scary. "Thank you," she said finally, "for saving me and bringing me here and being kind." "Oh, sweetheart," Mary said, setting down her sewing. "You don't need to thank us. You're a blessing to this family." "But I don't understand why you'd want me. I'm not your blood. I'm different. I come from people who were fighting your people." Jake leaned forward in his chair, his face serious but gentle. "Blood doesn't make a family. Love does. Caring does. Choosing to stand by each other does. You think Sarah was any less precious to us because Mary carried her in her body? You think we'd love her less if she was adopted?" "Family is about hearts, not bloodlines," Mary added softly. "And you already have our hearts, sweetheart. You're our daughter now just as much as Sarah is." "What about my real parents, my people?" "They'll always be part of you," Jake said. "Their love, their teachings, their memory, that's yours to keep forever. We're not trying to replace them. We're just trying to give you a safe place to grow up and become the woman they would have wanted you to be." Felt tears coming again, but this time they were different. Not the desperate tears of grief, but something warmer and more hopeful. "I want to stay," she whispered. "I want to be part of this family." "Then it's settled," Mary said, gathering into a warm hug. "You're home, little one. You're finally home." As drifted off to sleep that night in Sarah's room, listening to the familiar sounds of a peaceful household settling down for the night, she thought about her parents and what they would say about her new family. She thought they would be glad that she was safe and loved and had found people who would help her grow up strong. The grief would always be with her, like a scar that marked where something precious had been lost. But scars were proof of healing, not just evidence of pain. And maybe healing meant learning to carry love and loss together, to honor the past while building a future. Tomorrow she would start her new life officially. There would be challenges, people who might not understand or accept her, moments when she would miss her birth family so much it would hurt to breathe, times when she would struggle to find her place between two worlds. But she would face those challenges with a family beside her. With Jake's steady protection, Mary's gentle wisdom, and Sarah's enthusiastic friendship. She would face them with a home to come back to at the end of hard days. She was Eternal Blossom, daughter of the Modoc people and daughter of the family. She was a bridge between worlds, carrying the best of both. She was loved and she was home.